You make this rather snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
All right. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Bret.
How
are
you doing? I'm
sir?
fantastic. I'm Bret Starr. I'm the CEO and founder of the Starr Conspiracy.
I'm Steve Smith. I'm a partner at the Starr Conspiracy.
It's been a while, so we're a little rusty.
Yeah, no, we're not on our game today.
No, but we're going to get on our game because we're talking.
Totally going to get on our game.
It's going to happen at about right about here, about halfway through this beat, and I'll be on my game. But we are going to talk today about what the hell is going on in work tech. What the hell is going on in work tech? So I was talking with our producer Dana a little bit before we jumped on, and just kind of talking about how challenging the work tech environment is right now. And you jumped on and said, "Yeah, I'm getting a lot of inbound inquiries from executives at work tech companies who want to talk about what's going on in the market." So what kind of questions are you getting, and what kind of answers are you giving?
I mean, a lot of it is just like, is it just me or is it everybody? Because I think that, what I hear is it's been an extraordinarily difficult summer for work tech companies. Both talking to companies in the space, but also then talking to people like analysts and other folks who are also talking to vendors. It's very clear that it is pervasive, that there are a lot of vendors out there that are really struggling. And I think that, where they're seeing it is in just kind of decreased pipeline. Cost per lead is going up. It's very clear. We're pulling some data. Our very able colleague, JJ Lapata, we were looking at like top 25 keywords in the work tech space. And, over the last year, they're all down like 20%, 30%. In the last, 90 days, they've just like completely fallen off the table. Some of them, the keyword volume is off like 60%. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, it's very clear. It's just like, people are feeling it in terms of pipeline is not where it needs to be. Customer acquisition costs are going up. Buyers just aren't buying right now, and it's really inflicting a lot of pain in a lot of ways.
Well, let's level set, because this is a very important topic. It's not just going to be us complaining. It's going to be us talking about why it's important to know what's going on and what to do about it. So to level set, work tech is sucking. I'm going to go on record right now and say this has been the worst summer ever for work tech in what has been a challenging environment for a while now, well over a year. But culminating in just a terrible, terrible summer. That's number one. Work tech sucks right now. Number two is it's not just you. It's not just you. So if, you're out there, running this kind of company or that kind of company or whatever in work tech, and you're wondering whether the other, your competitors in your market segment or in adjacent market segments in work tech are also struggling, 9 out of 10 times they are. And it's not just you. And that's important for reasons, that we can discuss in a moment. But what kind of other, observations or nuances do you see out there?
What is becoming clear, I mean, in terms of like trying to, find some silver lining out there, is that we kind of felt like at the end of Q2, there was a sense that things had kind of bottomed out. I've been looking at a lot of data that's been coming in from, sort of different, third-party, sources that kind of follow the space in terms of like really looking at, startup performance. And it's very clear that there was a dip that really kind of like, definitely bottomed out, in Q2. But we're starting to see just kind of month by month things kind of like beginning to bounce back. Q3 is still going to be a challenging quarter, but both in kind of the projections from, some of these, different kind of like financial, investor kind of like, watch groups and so forth. But then also just kind of like talking to a lot of vendors and kind of people out in the space, the sense is very much that the ice is beginning to thaw a little bit.
Yeah.
That they're having more conversations with buyers that are starting to go somewhere, and I think that everyone I'm bringing this up with says, yeah, I think that Q4 is going to be better.
Yeah, and you're talking about both from, and it's an interesting dynamic, but both from the investment perspective and from the buyer perspective. So if you're a startup, you got to raise money and you have to sell stuff. You have like this, kind of dual business purpose that's always present, and both of those areas have been difficult. And some people might be like, duh, it's like it's hard to raise money when you're not selling anything, but it's more than that, because there's a lot of markets that develop without buyer activity, where VCs are funding ahead of a curve, or during a specific business cycle where they expect opportunity can be created. And this is just a unique circumstance where, funding really almost tracked with buyer activity. As buying activity was going down, funding was also going down, and both of those are picking up a little bit now. But it sure took a lot longer, and it's not happening as aggressively yet as we'd like it to. Me personally, I'm kind of looking at September. And hoping that we'll start to see a full-throated turnaround in September. But it's been long and slow and painful getting there, and with no certainty that it will happen in September. But some positive signs.
Yeah, and I mean,
signs out there.
What I think is kind of funny is like the NASDAQ had its first or best first half of the year ever. And so it's just like in some regards, there's, the market indicators are generally positive, but then you see stuff like, ServiceNow came out with a really good earnings report and their stock got pummeled. Same thing kind of with ADP. So there's a lot of, in spite of all that, there is some bearish sentiment out there. But what I think is really interesting is the fact that there are a number of really good enterprise software companies. I saw a report, I think it's from SaaStr, about this, and it tracks with conversations I've been having with kind of different investors in the space for 6 months. It's just like there's a lot of really good enterprise software companies that are just sitting on the sidelines waiting for better conditions to IPO, that have really good underlying fundamentals. And there's definitely a sense that maybe some of those will start to maybe see an IPO or two before the end of the year, but then in Q1 start to see a few more. And then by, the second half of next year, the floodgates could really open, which will start kind of a whole other burst of, I think, enterprise software funding. You just realizing how much is changing within enterprise software, how, basically people have, whether it's work tech or otherwise, people have pain points. They have needs they need to address, but they haven't had essentially budget or buying authority because everyone's been playing it safe, waiting for this recession that's never going to happen. And now you're starting to see, oh wow, inflation's backing off. Oh, some good earnings reports. Maybe there's not going to be a recession. And so I think that it's Q4 will be probably determined on whether or not some of that buying really begins to unlock or not.
Yeah, and so here's the $1 million question, which kind of answers itself. I'm sorry, it's the $64,000 question. Sorry about that, Steve. I know how much you care about accuracy. It's a $64,000 question. Are things going to turn around?
Yes.
Of course they are. Inevitably. Yeah, it's inevitable.
It's the business cycle.
Yeah.
It's the business cycle for a reason.
Right. So, to go back to the level set here, things suck in work tech, right? It's not just you, it's everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And this too shall end.
Right.
There is going to be a recovery. So knowing those three things and believing them are important. And there's several reasons why, but I'll describe a scenario that I'm seeing everywhere. And I think it's really destructive. It's really damaging to organizations in this kind of unique moment that we're in. Unique in some ways, right? And cyclical in others. But a lot of what I've seen is because people don't know that right now work tech sucks, that it's everyone, and that there will be a recovery, because they don't know those three things.
Mm.
They're turning inward to their organization to explain poor performance.
Right.
And they are processing their poor performance as something that they're doing wrong. And truth is, there's always things that can be improved with any organization, right? And times like these are a great opportunity to focus on continuous improvement, things that are more obvious when an organization is struggling versus when it's growing by leaps and bounds. But one of the things I've seen over and over and over again is this conflation of company performance based on the market situation with the perception of the internal performance of brand marketing and sales people mostly. And so a pattern that I've seen over and over again over the last year or so is, hey, we're not getting the leads that we used to. We're not getting the pipeline that we used to. Let's change our model. We're going to change our model from inbound to outbound, or from outbound to inbound. It's usually inbound to outbound.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're going to hammer down on sales. And whereas we used to have a very, kind of outcome based management style with them, where they had a quota or they had, whatever, and we judge them based on performance against that. Now we're going to start, really looking at their activity. Since they're not delivering the outcome that we want, let's manage them based on their activity. And in some cases in organizations, they're going beyond activity based management to full control, to control based management, which is, hey, not only do I want you to do A, B, and C, make this number of calls, do this stuff, but also want you to be at work at 8:00. I want you to come into the office. In some cases, I want you to clock in. People are using tools like Harvest and stuff like that to track people's time because they're not in the office anymore. And there's that paranoia, that productivity paranoia in remote environments where if I don't know you're working, I'm just going to assume you're not. So I want you to track your time, and I want to know that you're doing the activities that result in the outcomes that we want, even though the market pressure is such, or the market dynamic is such that no matter what activities you engage in, you're unlikely to produce at the same level that you did a year or 2 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And in turn, that's, creating some really bad customer experiences, some really bad employee experiences, and not really driving any benefit for shareholders. It's not creating a great shareholder experience. And I think the risk for so many organizations is basically playing really tight and trying to do everything they can to align everyone around a very short-term outcome. Like, hey, let's hit our numbers this quarter. That's the most important thing. When it's unlikely that's going to happen, and all the changes they put in place in order to achieve that can actually be very damaging to a company's long-term position in the marketplace, to their overall employee experience, to their overall customer experience, and ultimately to their shareholder experience. And so I think without that knowledge that this is a shared condition and we should be using this time to build great relationships with our customers, with our people, et cetera, et cetera, people are panicking because they think it's just them. We're used to seeing marketing people fired. We're used to seeing sales people fired, et cetera. But right now there's a bloodletting. I mean, people are, stepping down in, entire executive teams, sales leaders, marketing leaders, et cetera. It's almost like a traditional, okay, time for heads to roll situation, just so it looks like we're doing something.
Right.
And I think a lot of those moves are going to end up, not being great for the company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think that there is a distinction, though, between companies that, are essentially, either privately held or profitable enough that they can absorb, a down quarter or two. And those that are venture backed, that are, seeing their burn rate get into the red and getting to a point where they know that they need to go out and raise money in probably the toughest fundraising environment of anybody's lifetime. And the numbers don't tell a story that will get investment. And so I think that, some of it is, because like on the one hand, I guess in the first instance, it's just like, like one company that I can think of that, is privately held and doing, is, long time, in kind of work tech, won't talk about which category, in a category that is struggling overall, they're actually performing pretty well because they are taking more of an engaging buyer's motion and playing
Mm-hmm.
more of the long game.
Mm-hmm.
And they're seeing their overall marketing performance stay pretty steady, and also seeing their revenue performance, be, it's at the top of the category. And so, but they have the luxury of, they don't have to kind of go back to a board full of, venture investors who, everything's on a spreadsheet. There's a playbook. And if you don't hit X number by Y date, well, then, yeah, we are going to, your head's going to roll. We're going to we'll bring in somebody who can.
Yeah. And just to be really clear, I'm not saying that, downsizing specifically is necessarily the wrong response or a bad response for certain companies in the situation that you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's necessarily a mistake. And, it can be incredibly necessary. What I'm saying is don't get caught in the middle. If you catch the thread and you understand that work tech sucks,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's not just you, and that we will recover, then you have to ask yourself, like, what are you most capable of doing? Do you need to hibernate and cut resources and expenses as much as possible so that you can live to fight another day? The only scenario that I'm describing is the one where people are firing and replacing people, eliminating processes and replacing them with something else, all in an attempt to try to fix, air quotes, to fix what they perceive is, the root cause of their poor company performance. They perceive it's their own sales model, their sales team, their marketing model, their marketing team, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're still spending money. They're still, doing a lot of stuff. They're just, changing everything and creating bad experiences along the way.
Yeah. But I think that, the other factor is, this is as bad a tech market as there's been since 2002, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you go back to, 2009, which in 2008, 2009, which we remember, things were not as bad as they are right now. Basically the sales and marketing models still worked.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have, and that was 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, essentially you have, a generation of marketers and salespeople literally in SaaS-based enterprise software sales that have never known anything different. They're pulling the levers the same way they always have and expected to see, and the market is so haywire right now that ain't going to get it done. And so, but also it's just like you have a whole generation of investors, the same thing. Oh, well, we're not seeing the performance here, CAC's through the roof, the pipeline's not there. Let's just, let's cut heads and bring in another group that's going to do the exact same thing. And you're not going to see any difference because you're not really reacting to the environment the way that it is now.
Well, Steve, I'm glad you brought that up because I wrote a book about this topic.
You did?
What?
I haven't heard about this.
I wrote a book about this topic, and it will be available on Amazon in September. We'll have some copies at HR Tech. But the big point, it's exactly what you're describing. The big point of my book is that, the shit that used to work isn't working anymore. But I want to be careful not to conflate, those two things, the moment that we're in now and the fact that our core processes are, they're not effective anymore. Mm-hmm. We've been in a blocking and tackling universe since SaaS was a thing. And the blocking and tackling universe is basically about getting the right technology in place, the right people, the right processes. Everyone does everything pretty much the same way. You got MQLs, you got SALs, you got SQLs, you got HubSpot, you got, Salesforce, you got all these, purchase intensely. Everybody's doing the same thing. That's the blocking and tackling stuff, right? And when everyone's running the same playbook, when everyone's running the same blocking and tackling, and you have so many more tech companies than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it just can't be as effective by definition. You reach a point of diminishing return because when everyone's spending their money the same way, everyone ends up paying more for less of what's available. And interestingly, the antidote to that is a holistic approach to customer experience, which incorporates brand marketing and sales in partnership with product and customer success. And the reason it's so important for times like these is because if you're taking a customer experience approach, it turns out that what's good for the long term is paradoxically also good for the short term, right? And so if you were asking yourself, how do we maintain a great customer experience where, the quality of our customer experience is not, defined by where we are in the business cycle, then I think people will be making different decisions. And if they were going to change things about brand marketing and sales, they would be changing them based on moving to something like a customer experience orientation instead of moving away from something that they perceive as broken for a different root cause than the actual root cause. It's broken because it's broken.
Yeah.
And it's even more acute. People are feeling it more acutely because of the economy that we're in or the market that we're in. But even when the market, picks back up, if you're still running the blocking and tackling playbook, you're not going to have a competitive advantage.
Oh yeah, totally agree with that. And I think that, I understand why some companies are gripping it too tight now is because they're like Wile E. Coyote. They've, kind of run off the edge of the cliff and they're just, treading air, and they know that they have to try to do something, and they're doing what's within their existing playbook because that's all that they know.
Yeah. And so, I think if there were any advice to be offered, it would be this: catch the thread, understand what's going on. Work tech is sucking right now. Hopefully we're near, an inflection point and a turnaround. It's not just you. And we will recover. And think about the decisions that you're making in terms of your brand marketing and sales approaches. And are you, basically aggressively changing things for the wrong reasons and in the wrong direction because you perceive that you have a performance issue internally as opposed to a market performance issue that can create opportunities if you change expectations around, what you're supposed to be achieving right now. And so if you thought, for instance, in most of 2023, that what you ought to be achieving was selling more stuff than you sold in 2022, well, you're wrong in most cases. And if every decision that you make and every change that you're driving is more urgently based every day on the need to, rescue 2023 and put it in line with previous years, or demonstrate significant growth over previous years, then you may be changing things in a way that could be damaging to your business in the long run. And so just, really evaluate what is possible to achieve and what you should be achieving right now and frame your decisions that way.
Yeah, because it's just, we know that there are buyers that are in market right now, but they may not be buying until the end of the year. They may not be buying until Q1, but they're definitely evaluating vendors. And what you're finding is that sales teams are getting these, inquiries coming to them, and they're working them like, okay, so do they have BANT? Are they, can I get them into a demo today? And when they can't, they're just flipping them into marketing, and they're essentially throwing away all of the money that it took to generate that opportunity because of the experience that they're creating with that inquiry right off of the bat.
Yeah.
And there's so much waste going on in the customer acquisition pipeline that is just, I think it's just unforgivable because the buyers are there, but the motions are all wrong.
Yeah. And again, my book covers this in detail. It's too much to talk about today, but, the whole, blocking and tackling approach to sales and marketing and tech is really based on a very narrow outcome. And when people don't adhere to what we perceive as the buyer's journey in the sequence that we expect them to, jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting, from, a brand to marketing to sales, in exactly the way that we want them to, we mistake that for them not being qualified or not being engaged or whatever. And so all of our sales and marketing processes are geared towards getting, 0.005% of people out on the other side. And we miss all of these opportunities to create great experiences for, the other, 99.9% or more of folks because they're not following the flow chart that we drew. And everything that we do is tuned to that 1%. And it's ridiculous. But, I just offer this perspective about, people trying to figure out, what's next. I mean, do you remember in 2020, 2021, when the whole future of work changed? Remember that?
Vaguely.
How long ago was that? That was just like a few years ago.
Yeah, it was, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, surprisingly, right, during that period, during the pandemic, when all of that disruption caused, there was a moment of really significant growth for a significant number of work tech companies, right? And then we, kind of got into this period, the second half of 2022 and where we are in 2023, where, just the absurdity and strangeness of the world and the economy has conspired to chill the market, right? And I would just offer this question. When we said back in the day that there is so much switching that's going to occur because people found out during the pandemic that their work tech systems that they have now are not sufficient for the way people are, working and the way they'll work in the future. And not to mention, there's just a baseline level of switching that you expect every year, 20 or 30% solution turnover, every year. Right. And then we suspected that there was going to be even more on top of that because of everyone who said, well, that didn't work. And we wanted to change systems for a long time. So now's a great reason to do it. So all of this switching, do we think it all happened already? Because it didn't, know? I mean, there is so many transformations that are still waiting to happen inside companies. And I think a lot of those companies have put it off longer than expected because of the situation that we're in. But the long-term prospects of work tech and the needs that people have based on our recent experiences and all the experiences they had before that are still very, very real and are going to drive a lot of switching and a lot of buying.
Yeah, I totally agree. Those fundamentals are still in place, and they're going to play out throughout the rest of the decade. This isn't something like, oh yeah, everything's going to be set by 2024 and then everyone's going to be good. It's just like, no, this is a long shift in really kind of market dynamics, and it's just beginning to play out. It's just everything's stalled right now. Yeah. So, buyers aren't buying, but that is soon to change.
Well, here's to the fall. And for everyone out there, see you at Work Tech. At HR Tech. Yeah, I'll see you at Work Tech. I'll see all you Work Tech people at HR Tech. Right? So by the time everyone hears this, probably be a few weeks away from Work Tech. Fucking Work Tech. Dana, sorry.
She can fix it in post.
What's that?
She'll fix it in post.
Yeah, fix it in post. Anyway, we'll see most of y'all at Work Tech. God bless America. I'm done. I'm Bret Starr.
I'm Steve Smith.
We're the Starr Conspiracy, or we're part of the Starr Conspiracy. It's actually much bigger than just the two of us.
Yeah. We can't talk about the rest of it.